Planet Earth, the final frontier. Yet the mystery of why we are here is a mystery. But beyond our world there is another. One so small only ant-men can dare wander through it. Today, we go through the Microverse. Cells. We know it, yet we don't see it. But what is most interesting is that cells, like us, have a specific structure. Instead of organs, they have organelles. Instead of a brain, they have a nucleus. They are just like us, but just smaller. There are our teeny tiny cells. The cell structure is like a factory. At one end, we have our nucleus, the one who tells everyone what to do, how to do things, and what part everyone does in the factory. And the employees, or in this case, the organelles, do what they're asked inside the factory, which is, in this case, the cytoplasm. But what are their roles? What are they to contribute to keep the factory running? Manager, aka the nucleus, has all the genetic material, aka the DNA, stored in it, and the coding instruction for making the important materials that the cell needs, such as proteins. And of course, the manager office is surrounded by a wall, and that wall is called the nuclear envelope. Around the nuclear envelope, there are thousands of tiny nuclear spores. They act like a bulletin board where the organelles or the employees will go and get their, instructions. And then inside the office, there are the office area, which is in this case the chromatin, which has all the DNA and the proteins inside the nucleus. And in the middle of the office, we have the headmaster himself, also known as the nucleosis. This is where all the instructions are made, or in the science term, where all the ribosomes begin. They are basically the machines in a factory. Now, Leah, why don't you go and talk about this part of the cell?
Thank you, Ron, for that interesting info. Now to the good stuff, we should start off from the supply room. From the supply room of this factory inside our body. Without them, the factory cannot do its day-to-day activities. Of course, I'm talking about lysosome, the cytoskeleton, and flocculus. Flocculus are the storage of material like water, salts, proteins, and carbohydrates. They store it because they might need it later. And for the cleaning crew, we have the lysosomes. The lysosomes are small organelles filled with the enzyme. They act, as I said, as cleaning crew, breaking down carbohydrates and protein. Also, replacing old originals that have overgrown their usefulness, and of course removing excess molecules that are lying around.
Here's a fun tip about lysosome. Lysosomes are arguably one of the most important organelles in the cell, for it keeps the cell clean, and if a lysosome fails, then it's one of the main reasons that serious medical diseases occur.
The cytoskeleton moves molecules around the cell so that they can be used by another organelles in GI.
Experiment time! Here's a very cool experiment you can do in your own home. You will need for this experiment a transparent glass, some salt, some liquid soap, some grapefruit juice, and alcohol. In order to do the experiment, you must wear safety goggles and always have your parents there to help you at all times. The first step consists of you spitting on the transparent glass, then quickly adding a pinch of salt to it. Then add some liquid soap in it, then juice from a grapefruit, and some drops of alcohol. Once you have everything on the glass, stir the mixture. And there you go, you have your own DNA in a glass bottle. How freaky is that? A factory needs a product to produce, and for cells, that product is called proteins. For proteins, it needs to go through a series of organelles before it's able to be sent out into the open or to be stored in the cell's vacuole. And that stop for the protein is called the ribosome. The ribosome is where the cell the protein is actually produced. This is where proteins are made, and then the next stop for the protein is in the endoplasmic reticulum, or also known as the ER. For the endoplasmic reticulum, it kind of is like the bodyguard checking. It kind of is like the worker checking on the protein to see how it is, if it's good enough to be sent to the next checkpoint. But it's where the cell is checked, modified, like it is where the lipid components of the proteins are assembled. And then it goes to the final stop of the protein, which is the Golgi apparatus. In the Golgi apparatus, this is basically the final checkpoint for the protein. They're like gonna check if it's good enough for shipping, and if it is, then it's sent outside the cell or into storage for further uses. And that's all about proteins actually. That's how the cell makes its product. But what about the other stuff? And here's Zubair talking about it right now. Take it, Zubair.
Ya Allah, finally, now for chloroplast, mitochondria and the cell walls. Chloroplasts and mitochondria are the converse of the cell. They capture sunlight and convert it into food energy.
Aren't they the same thing?
Ya akhi, maybe how should I know? Well, yes, actually, chloroplasts convert sunlight to chemical energy in a process which you probably should know in KG1 called photosynthesis. While mitochondria convert the chemical energy, the chloroplast converts into different compounds that are used by cell walls.
In conclusion, cells are more complex than it looks, so never underestimate the laziness of a cell. They are as alive as you and most likely doing so much to keep you alive. So get out of your chair and thank yourselves for all that hard work they do for you. And I'll see you in the next episode of The Microverse.